supervision.
Okay. Who's usually your adult supervision?
Well, it's a combination. Normally there's it's Damien and it's Scott, but normally it's they're like, no, don't do that, and then wait, so it's not always helpful adult supervision.
Okay.
All right, let's see if this is.
That's good. I think every time that I've done this, it's been the two of us.
All right, cool, and we're live. We have 2 viewers already, so smashing success.
All right.
And now I do a thing on the Twitters, and then let's actually make sure that, what are we sharing actually here? We're sharing your desktop.
Yeah.
So that's kind of boring. I mean, for now.
Sure. It's gonna get real though.
It sure will. So We've got, this is confusing for me. I'm normally in San Diego, and this is all.
I'm normally here.
Yes.
But I'm still here.
But we're sharing from my desktop. But normally, well, I don't even know what we did last time.
Yeah, whatever.
We'll
just go with it.
So it's the MVP Summit this week.
It is.
Which is why I'm here, and also why Scott and Damien are not here.
They're
probably presenting something.
They're probably on stage right now.
So, and I don't know what we're missing. So let me see. I am going to need to watch the chat here and see what people are saying as far as, first of all, this is going to maybe feedback. No, it's not. Okay. I need to watch and see if people are saying, we can't hear you. Yes. There it is. This is going to pop up. So I'm John Galloway. This is Ryan Nowak.
Ryan Nowak. I'm a developer on the ASP.NET team.
And recent fame of, you showed the HTTP client helpers was one thing.
Yep.
Did you show another demo since then?
I was with my friend Javier talking about Razor and class libraries.
All right. Cool.
And I'm here today to talk about improvements to API authoring and general sort of backend stuff.
Awesome.
That we have for you in 2.1.
Cool. And we see people showing up. Can you tell us, can you hear us okay? Somebody on the chat just say, no, I can't hear you, or be truthful. Okay, audio and video is super. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to go to the Twitters. I'm going to tweet that this is live. Then we'll pretty soon after that switch over, and you can just show us what you've got going on.
Sounds good.
So just trust me, I am tweeting now, which is exciting, I know, to watch. Okay. This is so slow, too. All right, live at. Well, as I'm doing this,
yeah.
How big is the team? Like, you're talking about web API features.
Yeah, that's right.
And just for context, because it always blows my mind, how big is the group of people that's working on this stuff?
So the group of people for MVC, and I'll say MVC and Razor all up, is I think maybe 7 people, maybe 6 people, and about two and a half of us are full time on Razor.
Okay.
So the group of people for ASP.NET Core MVC, everything that has an MVC in the name, is really, when you take out Razor, more like 4 people.
Okay.
And so the features that we're showing today are things that were worked on by 2 people, including myself.
All right.
As well. So
awesome. Okay, so I guess we do not have community links for this week. I'm running back and forth between this and the summit, and I want to do them justice, so they'll be on next week. So let's jump over. Let's just share your screen.
Okay, let's go for it.
All right, so let's do some magical things. I'm going to switch to this and say present to everyone.
Okay,
there we go.
I see myself on the screen. I see my code on the screen. I think you see my code on the screen. So,
I do.
So cool. So I'm going to start off by just showing an application that I have here. And this is an API application. This is some code I wrote a while back that took a Swagger sample and converted it to ASP.NET. And we use this as a perf test.
Okay.
So it's kind of naive code, and it was kind of written, for my own happiness and to meet my own purposes. to roughly mimic a really small API that's part of a Swagger sample.
Okay, and to go back just a bit, Swagger is kind of it's a way of defining an API.
Sure. So Swagger has been renamed. It's called Open API now. The V3 of it is called Open API.
Okay.
What I'm showing here today is using the Swashbuckle project, which is a community project, which has support for Swagger/Open API 2.0.
Okay.
And it's a spec for documenting APIs.
Okay.
For REST APIs. And what you should be able to see on your screen right now, I'll make it a little bit bigger, is this is the Swagger UI.
Okay.
So the Swagger UI is a third-party JavaScript, HTML sort of rehostable content pack that provides a nice API for looking at and testing Swagger. If we dive in here to my startup code, you can see this is coming from the Swashbuckle library. I'll give a shout out real quick to the package name. I know this has been blogged about, lots of places I've talked about before. It's right here, Swashbuckle and ASP.NET Core. And I'm using the latest, what I think is the latest release. It's been talked about lots of places, but just in case you haven't seen it, this is configuring the services, and this is got two middleware here, one to serve a Swagger document and one to serve the UI.
Okay.
I'm going to go kind of quickly for
that Swagger document. That's the JSON file describing things, and then the UI is this page we're looking at.
Correct. And I'm going to go kind of quickly through this because I feel like it's been talked about in a lot of places already. If you have questions about Swagger or about Swashbuckle, I'll be happy to take those too. But I'm going to assume that this has been talked about lots of places, and you can hopefully get a sense for it if you haven't seen it before. This is a JSON file. Speaking of that, by the way, my code for this, I'm just going to show it quickly, is on GitHub. Rhino MVC demos. This is the only thing that's there right now. So if you want to browse this code and follow along or check it out, play with it yourself because you want to mess around with Swashbuckle, it's all on GitHub. It's all public.
Cool.
So getting back to this, I've got the Swagger UI for this API, which is kind of a nice way to look at what the code is that I have in this project. So you can see I've got a get by ID method here. I've got a delete by ID method here. I've got some sort of search methods here. And I've got post to update and post to upload an image.
Something that I need to remind people, and I've made this mistake too, this is going against your live database, right? So if you create or delete, you are actually, which can be handy if you need to enter some data in, but you are working with live data.
You are working with live data. So you see here, you can use this as a test page. So this is all the information that's provided by the Swagger document, and I haven't put a lot of work into getting this to really shine. I mean, if you really wanted to use this, some people author Swagger documents by hand. Some people use attributes and documentation to make them nice, add descriptions, those kind of things. It's kind of a sideshow to what we're talking about today. But if I put in an ID here and I say execute, it's going to think about it a little bit, and it's going to show you this is roughly the command that it would execute if you're on a POSIX system.
Which, by the way, curl is actually now included in Windows.
That's right.
The Windows Insider build.
That's right.
Which I love that. So yeah.
And then you can see the request URL here. So this is the URL that it would have hit. If we grab this URL and we do the same thing, you can see we're going to get the JSON here. And then you can see the actual request body that came back as well as some of the headers. So you can see that this does the authentic thing, right?
Yeah.
This is cool. I like the Swagger UI as a good way to just test an API or just kind of see what's there. And the one thing that I'm doing here that you probably would want to know if you want to do it this way is I have it set up to serve the Swagger UI from the root of the site.
Okay.
So that's what this route prefix equals empty string does, just puts it at the root.
Got it. Okay.
That's like the one thing that I've done here. And other than that,
just to clarify, why did you do that?
Oh, just so when I F5 it comes up.
Okay. Makes sense.
It's a little more meaningful than values controller.
Right. When you're building out specifically, the only job of this site is an API backend. So you just want to see that UI right off the bat for testing, especially. For testing, especially, right? Like if you may or may not choose to serve it in production. If you did serve it in production, you might want to give it a different URL. Okay.
But that's the one customization that I made. And so other than that here, you can see that this looks like pretty bog standard pretty bog standard MVC code, pretty regular stuff, right?
Mhm.
So, but I promised we were going to talk about new stuff, right? So
Yes.
I've got some old code here that I wrote a long time ago in kind of a naive way based on somebody else's sample, and I want to talk about a couple things and a couple problems with it. So one problem with this is I'll take this find by status endpoint here. I've got this string status, which is a required parameter.
Mhm.
And you can see it's not in the route. So in theory, it's going to come from the query string.
Yep.
So if we flip over to our Swagger UI, you can see that we've indeed figured out that it's going to come from the query string. And let's try it out. So if we put in, let's just try an empty status.
Okay.
So right away, you can see we get an error not found here because the status is going to be null.
Yep.
Right. So something that I don't like about this is that, well, it let us put in a null status,
Yeah.
right? And we got a 404, and like that probably shouldn't be allowed. So like what you would normally want to do here would be like, I want to validate that the status was actually provided, right? So, okay, so let's do if, string is null or empty status, and we'll say return new bad request result. Cool. So let's try that again. Great. So we're coming back down to find by status, try it out, and we'll just say execute with an empty string. And now, cool, we get a 400, but it doesn't really, it's not amazing. It doesn't really tell you what's wrong, right? If there's a third-party API that you're consuming, you would hope that it's actually going to tell you something. So, okay, what will we do about this? We could do something like this, and if you're kind of an advanced user, you might have seen something like this before. You can add your own validation messages here. It is required, right? But that's kind of lame. Something that we've done in 2.1 that was never possible before in MVC. And it's will sort of take most people by surprise that it has never worked. Validation attributes on parameters have never been a thing in MVC.
Yeah. Okay.
They are a thing now.
Okay.
So you can now put validation attributes on parameters. So we can do the familiar thing here. If you've written MVC applications before, you've probably seen this. So if model state is not valid, we want to return bad request. And we can do one other trick here that you can do with model state. This is not new, by the way. What I'm about to show is not new. You can say bad request with model state, and that will send any error that is client friendly will be sent to the client. So let's go ahead and do that. Oh no, I did the wrong thing. Okay, we're good. I clicked on the wrong browser. So let's go back to find by status, try it out, empty status. Cool. The status field is required, much better, right? Now you can do something with this. So that's nice that's automatic now.
So we have a question here. They're asking if we could do name of status.
Where?
I don't know. That was a bit of
for model state. Yes,
yeah.
Yes, you could. Okay. If you're talking about the example where I manually added stuff to model state, yes, you could.
Right.
So let's show something else that's kind of in this vein. So I've got and the other thing I want to mention about this new behavior to do attributes on parameters, validation attributes on parameters, is part of the 2.1 feature set.
Right. Okay. So this is part of the thing where you say, I want to opt into those features.
Yes.
Okay.
So in preview 1, the validation attributes on parameters is not controlled by compatibility switches.
Okay.
It is likely that it will be when we actually release it.
Why does that need to be? Does it break something?
It's looking like the implication of putting validation attributes on parameters may have broken some validation libraries.
Okay.
Or has broken people's custom model binders.
Okay, so the attributes on parameters didn't work before, but people may have been themselves inspecting those, looking for attributes.
What we found is that, and this is your feedback, by the way, you writ large, right? Is that the support for validation attributes on parameters means that due to some infrastructure stuff, some things are null now when we create a model binder that could never have been null in the past.
Okay.
Right. So that is something we would consider a breaking change. Right? These are the kinds of things that we think about when we add features. Is if we could break somebody's working code when we add a feature, that's still a breaking change.
Okay, so because of this, I have to go into configure services and I opt into compatibility mode. This sets compatibility mode for everything in MVC, right? It's like it's a toggle, meaning I'm not opting in at a feature level.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So this is something where I would want to take advantage of these new features. I'd want to test it, and then I'd say, and that's when, like, if I'm not, until I've tested it, made sure all this stuff works, I'm not going to flip that toggle. My code will stay working as it was.
And this separates your ability to upgrade the platform and the libraries from your ability to choose new behaviors.
Got it. Okay.
Now, the other thing about this is, and I haven't talked about compatibility switches on this show before, but I think blog post about it has gone live. Compatibility switches change the defaults. They don't overwrite your settings.
Okay.
So for instance, if you wanted to turn something off, you can still turn it off.
Okay.
However, we introduce compatibility switches when we're building a better version of something. And so we're not going to keep the old behavior around forever. It's to help you transition.
Okay. So it's almost kind of like the old behavior is deprecated. So you're saying by, like, for right now, I need to opt in, but in the future, some of those old behaviors may start going.
So assuming that we've done a good job, the plan is for everything that we've introduced a compatibility switch, for that to become the default in 3.0 and the old behavior to be removed completely.
Got it. Okay.
And these are mostly cases like the blog post explains in more detail. They're mostly cases where there's a serious design flaw or a serious bug or adding a new feature that we think most people are going to want has a small risk of breaking a few people.
Got it.
And validation attributes on parameters is another case where adding a new feature that we think everybody is going to want is going to break a few people.
Okay.
So that's why we do it this way. I mean, nobody wants to upgrade to the new version of the library and then see 50,000 things break and have no workaround, right?
And their only option is not to use the new version of, right? They can't upgrade.
Yeah.
So.
And to Michael's question, yes, this is all validation support for parameters. It's not limited to required attribute. To x86 Cowboy, we will get to you. And to Geeky Sacramento, I'm not super familiar with that. We don't control the language syntax.
Okay.
So, if there's something interesting there, let us know.
And so Geeky Sacramento, that the question there is saying required fields verbose. And as you're saying, Ryan, that's not, we don't come up with like we implement those features, but we don't create the.
This required and all these data annotation attributes are things that have been around for a long time. So you can see this is an old system component model data annotations thing that's been around for a really long time. The other thing about these is that like most things in MVC, there's an underlying object model and conventions, and you can write conventions that apply validators. You can write conventions that do all these things. If you don't like it, it's mostly customizable.
Cool.
So let's dive into another example of something that's been improved. And I'm only going to show the new behavior with this to save time. So let's update a thing here. So this is a post operation, and you can see it knows the model type, so it's generated some sample data for me. Let's just mess it up. Let's just totally mess it up.
Oh.
Boom. So this has given us a 500.
Yeah.
Which is not good, right?
Right.
And the reason why is that we've gotten in here, and this is unfortunately the HTML error experience, but there's a null check. There's a null check in here somewhere. So you could see if you
had some required things.
if we try this again, oops, I refreshed my page instead of sending the request again. Let's mess this up again, make something that doesn't make sense here, execute. You can see that we've gotten in here with a null model.
Couldn't bind
and it's gonna blow up, right?
Yeah.
So typically, and again, this is my naive code that I wrote. So typically what you'd want to do here is you would add if model state dot is valid, got my bang there, return bad request model state. And if we fire this up again, what you're going to see here, and you'll have to some extent take it on faith from me, which may not be worth a lot, but we have improved the error messages for this. So by default, if you're using the try it out. If you're using the 2.1 compatibility mode, we now have much higher fidelity of error messages that come from JSON.NET. So in the past, you would have seen something like error invalid input.
Okay. Yeah,
and now
this tells me exactly how to fix it, right?
It says invalid character after pressing property name, line 4, position 7. That is, right here.
Yeah.
So that helps a lot. We didn't give good error messages before. It would just say, data was invalid or something stupid like that. It's now much better.
And it's returning it in a JSON document instead of after the big HTML thing.
Yeah, well, that's the difference. That's the difference between a totally unhandled request and successfully returning an error. I mean, on the web and in an API, errors are part of your programming model. Yeah. I mean, it's part of the domain. You have to be prepared to successfully communicate about errors.
Cool.
So let's look at one other thing here, and I want to go back to the swaggerness about this a little bit here. So you can see that this method, and we're going to try this out again. Let's put in for execute, just choosing at random. You can see that we got some JSON content here for pet information. It's a lion who's had his vaccinations.
Good.
He's got a tag of tag 1, my great sample data here. And you can see that it's JSON data, and it seems to roughly match this pet model, but the Swagger information doesn't really give you a lot of joy. I mean, it doesn't really tell you what to expect.
Yeah.
And the way that we would have solved this in the past is we would have told you to do something like this. So we have a set of attributes that pretty much are just there to they're pretty much just there to do the Swagger.
Yeah.
So we would say type equals type of pet. So that seems, not great, right? Because you now have what I refer to, at least internally to the team, as attribute soup.
Yeah. You
have a lot of attributes that have to go all over the place to specify things that you would hope would be part of the programming model already. So we've done something a little different for 2.1.
Okay.
So I want to introduce to you all action result of T. So you can now have action result of pet, and it's a class, not an interface, because there are no conversions to interfaces. There are no implicit conversions to interfaces. And what action result of T enables you to do is, first of all, anywhere you use action results, all of our action results are convertible to action result of T for any T.
Okay. So you can just return pet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Second of all, T is convertible to action result of T.
Okay.
And T converts to object result of T.
Okay.
So anywhere that you were using like pet before, these two lines of code are the same minus the return state.
Okay. You just return pet. You don't even have to do okay.
So this helps in cases where people would fall off a complexity cliff in the past. Because imagine that you were starting with this. This is common, right? I want to prototype something. So, all right, find the matching pet and return it.
Yep.
And then you say, oh, shoot, what about the case where it's null? That should be a 404.
Right.
Right? Oh, this doesn't compile.
Yeah.
So now I have to do this.
Right. Okay, but now
now this doesn't compile.
Yeah, yeah. But now you're handling those conversions.
Yeah. So action result of T is something that's convertible from both T and our built-in action result types.
Okay.
And I'm missing a brace here, which is why it's complaining. So if you look at the definition of this guy, I keep forgetting my function.
Some people are pretty happy about that on the chat. That's cool.
That's cool. So if you look at this guy, you can see it's got constructors and it's got these implicit operators.
Okay.
So, and you can
it's just boilerplate code. Like there's never any value you're adding to that. You're just making it compile. So.
Yeah. There's also this new I convert to action result interface that we added as part of infrastructure in here. So you, in theory, could return anything you want that converts to an action result. One change that we'll probably do for preview 2 and beyond is we'll probably make this async.
Okay.
So that you can return anything that asynchronously converts itself to an action result.
Okay.
So if somebody wants to build their own dialect of stuff, you can build your own dialect of stuff. Action result is the command pattern. So if you want to asynchronously become an action result of any type you want, you can do that here.
Let me ask a naive question here. So task action result append.
Yeah.
Like it cleans up all the rest of my code, but the kind of nested task action, is there any, I mean, it almost makes me wonder if like a task action result of type ped or something, you know what I mean?
So funny you would mention that. We did not get it done for C# 7.2, but we've had some discussions about it.
Okay.
So there is a language feature that's required for us to do it. If anybody's super interested in the background, I can share with you. But the generated code that you get when you're inside an async method is going to look kind of like var x equals ... or sorry, not x, but t equals x ...
Okay.
And t will be whatever the task return type is. So the problem is that in the generated code, this is always action result.
Okay.
And so basically, yes, we understand the concern. A language feature is needed in order for async to be able to do the right thing in this case, which is why we didn't do it. But we got there right away, right? Because we're saying, well, who's the caller of your controller method? We are.
Yeah.
Right. And we never need to call it on a synchronous code path. So like if we could always await you. So why not allow action result of T to accept task of T or task of action result? And the answer is it requires compiler work.
Got it.
So we didn't get it done in time for 7.2. I'm hopeful that we'll pick it up for the next C# release.
Cool.
But that's the reason why.
Awesome.
So I want to go back to this and just sort of what did we do here? We improved find by ID by using action result. And so you can see now the Swagger data has the type and the example. It has all this information.
Because it knows the type.
Right? Yeah. Aren't types wonderful?
Yes. I mean, that's part of why we're programming in C#.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. Something else that we've done here that's super interesting. I'm gonna switch gears a little. I hope you're ready for me to switch gears. Let's switch gears. So I'm about to drop one of these. Ooh, not two.
Whoa. Okay. So now I remember API controller as a base class before, going back a ways, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we haven't done that. We've done an attribute. Let us know if you think the base class is important.
So what part of, and again, I'm the dumb guy asking the dumb questions for everyone else, so they can say, well, I actually had that question. So way back in the day, we had controller, we had MVC controllers, and then we got API controllers.
Yeah.
And then with ASP.NET Core, we have just a controller that can be both API and MVC.
Yeah.
And so for this, if I want a case where I have something that is just an API controller, I can drop this attribute on there that does, I would assume it's similar to previous API controller.
So it does, it's not exactly the same thing. It layers a couple new things on top of the existing controller surface. Okay. So like we said, it's not a different API surface. It's an attribute, so it composes with whatever. If you want to, by the way, you can do this kind of thing in MVC. There's nothing magic about the controller type. my base controller, put whatever functionality you want here. This is now your base.
It doesn't. You don't need that base class.
Yeah. There's nothing magic about any of the stuff that we provide. It's all sort of decoupled. So the one thing that makes your controller a controller is controller attribute.
Okay.
It's just usually hidden from you. And so if you look at API controller attribute, well, API controller attribute is also a controller attribute. Nice. The other thing here is this API behavior metadata. This is the thing that we look for. So if you have your own dialect of attributes that do stuff, this is just a marker. It just says, hey, treat this as APIs.
Cool.
So what this powers up, what API controller attribute powers up, is it powers up a few things that I'm going to show. So one thing that powers this up is, or one thing that this powers up, and I'm gonna start this again to show you, is there's this parameter here, ID, on find by ID, which is this method. And you see how this says path here? API Explorer infers this because it's part of the route pattern. But there's nothing in the code that actually forces that to be the case, unless you're using API controller.
Okay, API controller is what's going to turn that on.
So we've added a new convention for how parameters are mapped to our metadata and what we call binding source attributes. So we have attributes like from route. So if you put from route on something, API Explorer is going to infer from route, and the runtime will enforce from route.
Yeah. Okay.
Whereas if you put from query, this is now from query, and the runtime will enforce that it's only going to come from the query string.
Okay.
So if you were to say, have this other parameter here, then this could come from query string, or it could come from the route.
Right.
And it would work with either case.
Okay.
Right?
Whereas from route, it's only from the route.
From route, it's only from the route, right?
Got it.
So the point is that if you didn't have this, and this is an MVC, this is an MVC-ism, right? MVC is very flexible about what it accepts and where it reads data from, which is intended to make you as productive as possible when writing browser-based applications.
Right.
For APIs, it's not a great idea to be flexible about your.
You want to be very
your data sources. You want to
be locked down as far as.
You want to know what you expect people to do and provide clear guidance about how consumers can use your API. Whether or not it comes from the query string or the URL path is part of the contract.
Yep, or the body, right?
Yeah. So the general sort of thing that that API controller adds with respect to parameters is we have inference rules now around parameters and their data sources. So this couldn't be the case because it's a get action, but it works kind of like this. You have to use your imagination here with me. So complex type parameters are inferred to be from body.
Okay.
Anything in any parameter name that matches a parameter in the route template is inferred to be from route, and anything else is inferred to be from query.
Okay.
So it's a set of restrictions and sort of like refinements around the default model.
Okay.
But if you've ever been in the situation before where you've like forgotten to put from body on something, or felt like putting from body on a bunch of post methods is tedious, well, we have a feature for you. It infers what we think you're likely to do anyway for your infers what we think that you're likely to do anyway for the parameters of your API actions.
Okay. All right.
So
the TLDR on that high level is controller like has binding, has conventions that work with both MVC serving HTML, and it works with APIs. By dropping this attribute on, you like are more strict with your API binding and stuff.
You're sacrificing a little bit of flexibility, which may not actually be a sacrifice at all if you're writing an API, in order to get things to be sort of. We hope it fits like a glove. Basically, we hope that the convention matches what you wanted anyway. If you have scenarios, yes. So from body is optional now with API controller.
Cool. Okay.
For complex types. If for some reason you have a simple type that you're reading from the body, stick a from body on there. And let us know what you think.
Yeah.
If this is a good fit for what you expect it to do anyway, let us know.
That's a good,
otherwise, if it's not, let us know what you're doing and why it doesn't match your expectations.
So that's a good point to bring up too. We're at a preview level for ASP.NET Core 2.1. So if people have feedback, is it too late to make any changes?
Now is the time their feedback is most valuable, because the stuff that we're doing for 2.1 is out there in a form you can use. So you don't have to guess about what we intend.
Right.
But any feedback that you find about things that you don't expect to work is going to be helpful to us.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So you heard that. Get your feedback in now. Test it. Try it out.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So a couple of questions here. So Michael says he thinks a base class is valuable. Dane says basic API context is faster or less memory. It's not a customization of EF, Dane. It is just a standard DB context. So there's no trickery here. I'm a novice EF programmer. x86 Cowboy, yes. Shane, can you say some more about that? I'm not sure what that means. I'm not sure what, so I understand that you're saying you want it to come from, so you want to bind a model from the body and then also bind a single property from the route. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah,
I'll answer anyway. If I'm understanding that correctly, you will still have to perform gymnastics. This feature will not help you. If it's important that it be a single model object, we don't have anything that will help you right now.
I mean, there's no real convention that's going to make that super clear, because if you're pulling things in from both the body and the route, so what if you have a conflict? How do you merge that stuff together?
Yeah,
right?
we've considered designs that do that sort of thing, but we haven't ever felt like it was important enough or mainline enough. We tend to focus on the things that we would tell everybody to use.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not clear why we would tell everybody to do everything that way.
Okay.
So yeah, sorry, I don't have anything to help you with that. A couple other things I want to talk about here. So along with API controller, something else that we're doing in 2.1 that we're going to be doing more of, and we want to know what you think about. And this is an area where we would love your input and your engagement. So over here in the Solution Explorer is the star of the show. You can see MVC now has analyzers.
Let me get this out of the way so we can see.
Oh.
It. So nobody else has seen the chat. I just have it up on the screen so we can.
So MVC now has analyzers. I'll make it a little bit more central here. So I'm talking about the Solution Explorer dependency nodes over here. So we've got a few that we're starting with here. We've got controller actions must not have async void. This is a fairly common mistake. Async void in ASP.NET will only make you sad.
Yeah.
So it will make you sad, and it's a mistake that we've all made. I've made numerous times. Method was void, and I added async. Oops. So we have an analyzer now that will tell you if you're doing something async void in a controller. And I think we have an item tracking doing the same for pages as well.
So what does that mean specifically? If people aren't familiar with analyzers, what is this going to do? Is this a build error? Is this a
So it's a message. So if you look in the sidebar over here, and it might be kind of hard to see, there's the dark green errors. And so you can see, like here, this is saying, hey, you should use action result of T. So I do have a code fix for this, but it doesn't work with task right now, which is a bug that I should log. And before I get too carried away with talking about how great these are, I do want to point out one thing about these analyzers, or two things about these analyzers, three things about these. There's so many things I want to point out about these analyzers. I'm going to flip over to the project file, and you can see Microsoft ASP.NET Core analyzers. So there's a big 0-1 here, and I want to be forthright about that 0-1. This is alpha quality stuff, and it's a work in progress, and we're kind of throwing it over the wall.
So what's the impact of an analyzer bug
Sure.
in my code? Is it like, for instance, if there's a bug in like an identity library or the MVC library, that's going to have huge impact.
It could cause you to patch your application, perhaps,
Right.
or to, rush through urgent security fixes, or to have a build break or test failures.
Bad things.
The impact of an analyzer is that you have a squiggle.
Okay.
And you have some messages here.
So it's clear. It's important people understand these are alpha. These are new. Like the quality is alpha level, and you're still building them. But
yeah,
I don't have to be worried about like. The impact of a bug is not.
It's not gonna shatter your world, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So like this is a bug.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
This is a bug that we have where this analyzer thinks that the controller method or the controller constructor is an action method. Oops.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So I have a couple choices here. I could remove the package if I'm fed up with these errors and I just don't care anymore. You could disable it in code.
Yeah.
You can disable it in a global file. If we have an analyzer, if you like 99% of our analyzers and there's one that you don't care about,
yep,
you can turn it off for your project, or you can turn off specific usages if we're wrong. Let us know what you think about these. It's definitely our goal that they're not noise.
Yeah,
like this is a mistake, right? Mistakes are not mistakes need to be fixed.
Yeah,
but it's our goal that the analyzers reinforce things that we would recommend that everyone use.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of things that it's like, well, this feature exists in MVC for old reasons, and this feature has to be there to support the people who want to use it for the things that they want to use it for. But we wouldn't tell anybody to start using it today.
Yeah.
Right. Or we wouldn't tell anybody to use this feature for this thing. Analyzers are a tool that we can use to help you get it right.
Yeah. So you can guide people in the right direction, but it's not going to break their build or whatever.
So like async void, right? Like
yeah.
Async void is always wrong from our point of view. We can't really have it throw an exception because we don't know. I mean, it'd be flaky and difficult for us to find out about async void, except with an analyzer. Okay. So to Geeky Sacramento, so analyzers do work in views actually. So one of the changes that we're doing in 2.1, one of the previous talks that I was on with my friend Javier, we're talking about Razor and libraries. Razor in 2.1 preview 2, so not in preview 1, but in preview 2, which will be released in the future. I can't say when. Razor will provide errors at build time, and that will include analyzers.
Cool.
By default. So the default experience for Razor is going to be build time with errors. You can opt out of it. There's still runtime compilation, but that will be the default in 2.2. We've done a lot, or in 2.1, preview 2. We've done a lot of work in MS Build to make that happen.
I mean, the whole thing with analyzers and, how layers on top of all the, like, they're built with taking advantage of Roslyn, right? Yeah. And understanding your code. And Geeky Sacramento brings up that it's a sanity, for large groups and architecture groups and stuff. I was joking about this just yesterday with Nick Craver, who works at Stack Overflow, and he's part of code reviews for a lot of code all the time. And they've actually created analyzers on his team that are just things that piss off Nick. And so they just all install this thing and then they just don't make these errors anymore. Nice. And it's,
that's pretty good.
Yeah. So it's really pretty smart to, like, what I'm picturing here is these analyzers you're building are really useful, but also I'm going to take a look at these and use these for my own analyzers too, which is cool.
So with the analyzers, back to the few things I wanted to point out. So these are alpha quality. Mm-hmm. We've implemented a few things that we think may be useful. There are more things that we think are useful that we haven't done. If you have ideas or you want to contribute code, talk to us about it. Go to the MVC repo, log issues, start a discussion.
Is there like a label or is there a way to filter down what those analyzers are? Okay, so it's just in the MVC repo.
Over here, I like the idea that you're going for here. So if we go issues and we search for analyzer, I don't know if we have a tag for it or not. I'm just gonna check real quick. So there's a bunch of things that say analyzer.
Okay.
So you can see that there are some places where it's been talked about. If the bug sounds like create a new analyzer to warn users about HTML.partial, and it's in 2.1 preview 1 or preview 2, and it's assigned to Pranav, that's something that's going to happen,
Yeah.
right? We're loosely committed to doing that. So anyway, my point being that if you have feedback about this or you want to see what we're thinking about, use the issue tracker. Also, with this, I'm going to drop to the command line here. This is going to be little text, but hopefully you can see it. So the analyzer package is not on NuGet. It's not going to be on NuGet soon, I don't think.
Okay.
Because we're considering this alpha quality. The other nice thing about analyzers is that they can be version independent because they don't have to be versioned along with the libraries. So the analyzers can kind of keep chugging along. They don't have to be tied to a release.
So the thing you're showing there is that it's not in the NuGet feed. This is in the MyGet feed.
Correct.
Which is where kind of alpha and early and nightly and those kind of packages.
Correct. So if you go to .NET, MyGet, if you just want to look at what's there, and you look at ASP.NET Dev, where is the feed called? ASP.NET Core Dev, that's it. You'll find the analyzer package here. And I would suggest, at least sort of to start with, there's a few of them. We also have one for logging, which verifies the format of your log strings. So you don't have syntax errors in your log strings.
Now,
I would recommend just grabbing this ASP.NET Core Analyzers package and actually using a star wildcard for it so that when we update it, you'll get new stuff. And you can keep giving us feedback about it.
So we were talking earlier about Web API in general. Are there analyzers that are specific to Web API, or are these just kind of a collection of analyzers all up, sort of?
So this package, ASP.NET Core MVC Analyzers, will have analyzers all up.
Okay.
We will be adding more. So you can see here are some common like log string mistakes that we have analyzers for.
Okay.
There will be a whole lot more. We think that this is an area where Microsoft could provide a lot more value to people, is making mistakes more obvious and making it easier to migrate by doing things like code fixes. Like
you said, kind of more of a gentle like guidance towards,
hey,
people make this mistake a lot. We're not going to break your build. We're not going. You can type this if you know what you're doing, but we want to guide you towards doing this.
Yeah, thing. I mean, there's a certain quota we have for showing up in your error log. So now that we're not breaking things every day, we have to find a way to keep our presence in, in your error list. So you can see a couple analyzers here, including some that I haven't gotten to talk about here. So it says, hey, use attribute routing. Actions with API controller attribute do not require model state check. So for instance, another thing that I haven't had a chance to talk to you about is this API controller. Don't need it. It will do that by default now.
Okay. By putting that API controller attribute on, it's going to do that check.
Yep. The other thing to mention about the model state, the bad request data flow, is what happens when you do bad requests with model state is customizable.
Okay.
So there's a blog that my friend Dan Roth wrote about the API controller features that are in 2.1, and I believe it's been posted. I might be wrong. If I'm wrong, wait a few days and I'll be right.
Yeah.
If you're watching this video in the future, it's definitely been posted. That includes an example of how to customize what that does.
Okay.
So we're not trying to lock you into a specific way of doing things. Just there's a mechanism to customize that you can override. By default, it's going to do what bad request model state has always done.
Okay. We have a question here from x86 Cowboys.
Yeah.
And if the analyzers move version independently of the MVC version, are the analyzers smart enough to recognize MVC compatibility flags and version differences like action result versus action result at T?
It's a good question. So we're introducing it for so one is, yes, we can find that in code when we do analysis. So you can look at bodies. I mean, this is looking at a body here. So as long as you know the set of APIs that you're looking for, you can do that. When the analyzers get to stable level of quality, we might version them.
Okay.
For now, they're going to kind of float. So like there's been this problem in the past with like people trying to mix floating versions of packages with stable versions of packages.
Yeah.
I guess what I wanted to express is that the analyzers don't change what your project references. So they won't break your build that way. we may decide to version them in the future. I shouldn't make promises that I can't keep.
Okay, cool.
Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, you're right.
So I'll try and answer Michael Powell's question. He was saying, is this like a pattern hook for resharper? And I don't think so, because a pattern hook does kind of like the pattern matching and as he's saying, pattern replacement, that sort of thing. A code or an analyzer is more actually using Roslyn to inspect your code. Right. And so it's not kind of just like doing a match. It's actually doing a more of a like code inspection. It doesn't matter what it's going to find. If I use some weird base class or whatever, it's still going to be able to. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. More thoughts about versioning. Never run unversioned. So what's that? What's the concern with that, Michael, for the I'll acknowledge that it's on us not to break you.
Yeah.
I would say for the analyzers before they go 1.0, you should assume that they are going to align with 2.1 for now.
Okay.
Right. But for things like, there's no reason why you couldn't use them with earlier stuff. So for instance, these API controller analyzers, like if you're not in 2.1, then you're not using this feature. So you won't see these messages.
Okay.
Right. Likewise, async void applies everywhere. Logging applies everywhere. I hear the concerns about using the analyzers with different versions of MVC. That's a good point. Okay. Maybe we have to think about that and come up with a plan for it.
Cool.
Right now, the analyzer stuff for us is in the like crawl not walk stage, right? So there are bugs with what we have. And we know that we're going to work on it more.
Is the plan for these still to ship with 2.1 though? I mean, are these?
It's not super clear.
Okay.
To be honest, I think it depends on a few things. It depends on what level of quality they get to.
Yeah.
It depends on how much time we have to spend on it. It depends on how valuable people think they are, and it depends on if we think that there are a lot of important things. So one of the things I want to mention this issue here. Create a new analyzer to warn users from using HTML partial.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem with HTML partial, and the reason why we want to warn people about it, is that, well, there is an async version of partial, HTML partial async, and we think that everybody can switch to partial async.
Yeah.
And
that's been since like MVC3.
Numerous people have reported problems to us with partial deadlocking their site under certain circumstances. And we want to try and flush. There's sort of a higher level back channel thing to try and flush all of those kinds of problems out of the system.
Okay.
And like, we think that guidance is really important.
Okay.
Right. We think that the guidance to use partial async over partial is really important. So we want to get that out there to people. I think what's sort of motivating our decision is how ready for usage are these things. And it's possible that we might split the world into like analyzers that we think are ready to go and analyzers that are experimental.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. Derek says we need an analyzer to analyze the analyzer analyzing the later versions.
Yeah. So Eugene, for your question, that is how it works. So the analyzers look for API controller on this class or in the class hierarchy, and then we'll do the right thing based on that.
So the analyzer is enabled or the behavior changes depending on that API controller.
So if you so you notice, like I said, this is a bug, right? It shouldn't be making noise about my constructor. But if I take this away, it's gone.
Okay.
Right. Whereas like if I did something like this, and you should never do this in ASP.NET, right? You should get this message without it being API controller.
Okay. Can I ask a question?
This message, sorry.
What can you show, like you've got that repo open? What does the code look like for one of these analyzers?
Yeah. So I'm just gonna get back to where it was. Oh no. That was harder than typing. Yeah. So let's go to MVC. Sure. So let's go here. So let's start here. So this is Pranav on our team, by the way, has been doing most of this work. He is deeply passionate about this, and a lot of these things are things that he just felt like doing and spent some of his own time doing. So kudos to him for this. So this is where the project is. It's in our repo. The MVC analyzers are in the MVC repo, which I think hopefully makes sense to you. The sort of heart of it right now is there's a base class for the analyzers that figures out if it's a controller.
Okay.
Right. So any analyzer that inherits from controller analyzer base is going to apply to controllers. And you can see that like the first thing that we do is this thing does some work. And it basically says, first, we need to figure out if it's a controller.
Yeah.
And then after that, we can do some more work. And this will be called on types. And then you can see that there's another variant of it, API controller base, which is going to do the same thing basically, but for API controller.
Okay. So you're not repeating that work in all the different analyzers.
So let's look at an example here. And I think the void one is one that's really easy to understand. So we're going to look at both the analyzer and the code fix. So the analyzer provides the squiggle, and then the code fix changes it to the correct version.
Okay.
So this is diagnostic analyzer for C#, and you provide you declare what a diagnostic descriptor. So diagnostic descriptor is like, think of it as like a format string for the error message.
Okay.
So when you come here and you say public, well, hopefully you don't, right? But if you say async void foo, and you see this, controller actions must not have async void, and then you see that there's a right here, MVC 2001, MVC 2001, right? All the way back in 2001, we knew this was bad. So that's important because if you, for some reason, wanted to suppress this, and you should never do this, you can suppress it with the error code. So that's what all this infrastructure is for. So we declare a diagnostic descriptor, and I think that's in some static class somewhere. I can show that if people care. We register a syntax node action, which just says like, hey, call me on syntax nodes. And then for methods, I think, down here, this is the next part. So we say, call me on methods. And you can think of, if you haven't done compilers or analyzers before, you can think of the data structure that you get here called the syntax tree as like a tree representation of the code you wrote. So all of this stuff, this is the method, or including the attributes, I believe. This is the method from the compiler's point of view. And these will all be children of the method. So, okay, so we have a method, and the syntax is like, what's the text you typed? The semantic model, on the other hand, provides more meaningful information about the code. So it's like derived from the code you typed. We figured out these types.
Okay.
So get the semantic model, get the symbol that matches the method. So take the method, get the matching symbol. And then we have a utility method here to say, is this an action? If it's not an action, skip it. And then if it is not async or does not return void, then return. And all this stuff here, this method.isAsync, method.returns void, this is all part of Rosalind's API. We didn't write any of that.
Okay.
And then here, okay, so we're going to take the name of the system threading task type.
Basically, if it's gotten to this point, it's an async and it returns void. So
yeah, and the rest of this is just the cleanup, right? We're formatting the error message.
Okay.
And then creating the actual instance of the error message, I should say. And then the code fix for this is going to look pretty similar. And so the code fix, you don't need to like redetect the problem, because the code fix will be detected. The code fix will be applied to the same case. So here you're saying, I'm a fix for this diagnostic.
So we already know what the problem is.
Yeah, we already know the problem. You don't need to find it again. And then we register code fix, and the code action is got this title. And you give them a lambda to change it, right? So it looks like here, where is root node context.span? So context.span will be the like location that had the error. And in our case, the location that had the error is location. Where does location come from? Right here. So it's the location of the return type. So what happens here is we're taking the return type. I keep deleting this. Oh, it's right here. We're getting the location of this symbol in the code, and then we're passing that through as the location of the error, so that over here we have to take the location of the code and say, all right, given this position in the text, find me the syntax tree node that corresponds to that position, because I know that's what I want to change.
Okay.
And then this is just the work that you need to replace it with the declaration for system threading task.
Okay.
Right. So you can see this in action if we come back over here, and let's remove the suppression. So if we come back over here, the error will show up. You can control dot, and this is our code. This is our code fix. So this title actually came from our code fix.
Okay.
You say enter, and it just does its thing.
Nice.
Yeah. And Rosalind does a good job as far as, like, you know, this wouldn't be very useful if it looked like typical generated code. Typical generated code looks like,
yeah, it looks horrible.
Looks like this, right? Yeah. Like that wouldn't be very useful. So a lot of the niceness that Rosalind provides in these things is when you write a code fix or something like that, they do a pretty reasonable job turning it into code that you might actually want to see in your project.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I apologize for taking you off on that tangent. I just
that's all right. That's all right. It is interesting, and that's actually the end. That's all I had. So.
Good. Okay. Let me drop us out of the sharing of the screen, and awesome. So for people that have been watching or people watching later, now as your main kind of takeaway was now's the time to get in, try these features out. You can go to the file bugs on the MVC repo or just get in touch. I mean, we're here every week, ask questions, and there's a question in the chat. Someone asked, wait a minute, where's Henselman and Damien? Reminder, Damien every other Tuesday, so that's the 10 o'clock ones. Damien's not here, which means we get someone from the team coming in and showing us a specific feature. And then, but both Damien and Henselman are at the MVP Global Summit. That's a yearly thing where Microsoft MVPs they all come to Redmond and they get shown new things and get briefings and all kinds of stuff. So that's where they are. We'll all be back next week.
All right, great. Thanks, John.
I think we can do a dramatic zoom out. Although, do you know how to do this thing?
You zoom out.
Zoom out. Okay.
I'm ready.
So first we got to zoom in, though, right?
Yeah.
And then I got to get ready to stop the broadcast. All right. So you ready?
Yeah.
Dramatic zoom out.